Scott, man, we're so excited to have you on the podcast.
What's up?
In the Mafia dungeon.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah.
The lights are shining, the mics are on.
I love it, bro. This is awesome.
We're pumped, man. This is a long time coming. I know we were saying before we hit record, Harry's been going to the Thrive Church for a few months and been getting involved in the small groups with Natasha's triathlon group and absolutely loving it. And then I've been in Bastrop in Austin for a little over a month, 2 months, and have been going to church probably like the last 4 Sundays, and it's just had an unbelievable impact on us and such a unique experience, man. So we're pumped to just dig into all of it with you today.
Man, that's so awesome. That's so cool to hear. And it's been great getting to know you guys too and kind of hearing your journey, and getting to be a very small part of that has been really awesome over the last few months. So
yeah, for anyone who's listening, Scott is our pastor, and he's been helping us on our spiritual journey over the past few months. But I still remember when Natasha and Brett and I had a conversation just around this whole topic, several months back, and it really sparked something in us to really want to start committing to being a part of the community. And she does such a great job with that. And her triathlon community also just is kind of like funneling into everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
So being a part of that has just been so great.
Natasha is incredible. It's been so cool to see over the last couple of years how God has really just moved in and through her and everything that she's doing with NVDM coaching. I remember a couple of years ago during the pandemic when her opportunity with BPN came about, and we prayed about that, and Natasha made that move to coach Nick Bear, and after that, just things really, really took off for her. But it's been incredible as she's gained influence in the triathlon community, how she has put God first. She puts God first in everything, and I think she's an incredible example of what it means to ascend to the highest levels of her profession while still putting God first. And, a lot of times when they do begin to experience success, sometimes they leave God behind. But she hasn't done that, and it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean,
she uses her platform for the purpose of God,
yeah,
which is awesome.
Totally. Yeah. And I think you would call that out in church because it's something really special to see, because I mean, literally within 2 years, she's built arguably the biggest triathlon club in the entire country. And faith is like a core focal point to what she does. And even on, Sunday, you guys you offer the one Sunday mass, and half of the room is her athletes in there. So I'm sure that's pretty cool and special for you to see too.
It's so cool. It is just so cool. And then the group that meets on Tuesday nights at her house is just full of athletes. And I mean, we've seen people from NVDM come to faith in God. We've seen people baptized from NVDM. And so it's really a great relationship. I even sometimes call it a partnership that we have, because it's a partnership in the gospel. And, it's really cool that our paths have crossed. And I have so much love for Steve and Natasha, Nadine, the whole family, and then the whole NVDM crew. I love being a part of it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we met on the track for the first time, which was awesome. I remember like huffing and puffing on the Ladybird Trail together.
That's right. Yeah, no, I was just trying to keep up with you, man.
That's not true at all.
This 40-year-old guy here trying to keep up with you guys, pretty much.
That's not true. What did you have do? 130? Was it a 136 half marathon a couple weeks ago, and then you preached right after?
Fastest passer in the country.
I mean, no, I mean, like in that, I didn't really train very hard. It was like, but I was actually happy with that outcome. Considering I didn't train too hard, I was a little off on my training. But yeah.
And one of the things that strikes me, and we were kind of talking about this in the elevator a bit, about Thrive Austin, which is the church that you run. It's very much like a startup church, which is different than I think what both Brett and I experienced growing up. And so both of us kind of coming back to and really wanting to spend more time with our faith, like being a part of this smaller community has been so great, because you really feel like a part of what's happening. And you guys are just kind of like in this infancy stage, but it's going to be amazing to see what you guys do. But I think from my perspective, like it being so small has really helped us like get more in touch with our faith, and kind of just more exposure to you, who's been able to like lead us. And so it's just really cool.
That's awesome to hear. There's something fun about this stage that the church is in, because I know that the church won't always be in this stage, but there's like a grittiness to it. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
It's like this pioneer feeling of like, because our family, we moved here from Houston from a much larger church. I was on staff at a really big church. Well, not really big, but 1,200 people, very established. And to come from that, to come here with very few people, very few resources, and then just to build a church from basically the ground up. This is biblical stuff, the stuff you read about in the book of Acts. To be a part of that, there's just something that's so sweet and so cool about just feeling like you're pioneering something,
Yeah.
and there's a grittiness to it. And, I've actually really appreciated everything that I've learned along the way on this journey.
Yeah, I remember the first time I showed up, one of the first things that I noticed is when you were giving your message, you were speaking to people that were attending the church by name, calling out Harry and stuff like that. And I was like, I've never been in a right. I was I've never been in a setting that's so intimate where the pastor is actually being able to preach directly at the people that are in church. So it's just a different level of connectedness. And I think the other thing too that you had mentioned to us that I didn't know is that before you took the offering at Thrive, you would have the opportunity to go to a couple large churches, which was traditional to what you had been doing up to that point, but it seems like you really felt a calling to start something from scratch, right?
Absolutely. And even recently I've had offers, to take over churches in other parts of the country that are larger and more established with big budgets and staffs and all that stuff. And, at the end of the day, what's most important to me and my family is what is God calling us to? And we feel confident that God is calling us here to Austin, Texas, to build this church, to do something completely new, to start a new work. And we're committed to it, man. And it's fun. We enjoy it, man. It's a blast. And hearing the stories like what you guys are sharing, and then seeing the stuff that's going on in NVDM and, other areas where God is really moving in and through the church. It's just it's so awesome, man, to be a part of. And I'm doing what I love to do. I'm living the dream as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know how much y'all want to get into that, but God placed a dream on my heart, a long time ago. And to me, it feels like this is the culmination of it. And it's not easy, but I'm living the dream, man.
It's so awesome to hear, and seeing someone on a mission like you and Natasha, it's just inspiring. And maybe that's the perfect segue into your sort of backstory and kind of how you found your faith, because we know it, we've shared a coffee over it, but I think for the listener it'd be really powerful to hear.
Absolutely, man. A lot of times when people have gone through the sorts of things that I've gone through, they like to keep that private. They like to keep it secret. But a long time ago, God just told me, to share this story, as many opportunities that I get to share it. And, so my story kind of starts out, I grew up in Lubbock, Texas. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Lubbock, Texas.
West Texas, yeah.
Not a whole lot there, and, it's very flat. The wind blows really, really hard. That's kind of how it is at Texas Tech University. But, I grew up in Lubbock, Texas. And, one of my earliest memories growing up was when I was 3 years old, my parents split. And the reason why they split was because my mom really felt like it was going to be best for us as a family because my dad was an alcoholic. And so, when you're 3 years old, you don't totally realize the impact that that's going to have on you, as an adolescent and as an adult. But it had a massive, massive impact on me, reflecting back growing up. But, growing up kind of in a single mom household, when I was about 13, 14 years old, I kind of started to try to assume that role as man of the house. And I started kind of making my own decisions. And I got in with the wrong kids, man. It's kind of like that typical story of you started running with the wrong people, the wrong crowds. And when I was 14, I tried for the very first time, I smoked weed. And I remember after smoking weed for the first time, it was just I was off to the races. And I tried 8 different kinds of drugs within that first year. I was 14 years old. I was partying with frat boys at Tech, and they were all experimenting, having fun with drugs and stuff. But for me, it was I was a 14-year-old and I was doing LSD. I was doing cocaine. I was eating mushrooms. One of my best friends was a shroom dealer. So we had pounds of mushrooms all the time. And we're not talking microdosing. We're talking about grams and grams, just constantly. It was all the time. And so my life just sort of started to spiral downwards. And I started to fail out of school and things just kind of started to go sideways in my life. And When I was 16 years old, that was the first time I tried the substance that was really going to take me to the darkest place that I've ever seen in my life. And that was when I tried crystal meth. And for anybody that's ever tried meth before, like, you know that meth is not one of those things like that you just like at the end of a hard day, you kind of wind down and, you know, you snort a little bit of crystal meth and just kind of like chill. Like that's not the way it works. It's like, you don't even just like go out on a Friday night and maybe like have a little bit of crystal meth. And like, it doesn't really work that way. Like once you take it into your body immediately, it just grabs a hold of you and all you want is more. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I did it, I was up for 7 days on meth. Jesus. Yeah, with no sleep and ate very little and basically just like was out of my mind, man. And it was wild. And I was 16 or 17 years old at this time. And I remember when I finally crashed, my mom was like, dude, like, you got to go to rehab or you got to get out of the house. You got to go to rehab. So that was my first day in rehab. It's about 17 years old. And so tried to get clean, stayed clean for about 60 days. While I was getting clean, I hooked up with another friend of mine that I used to party with, and he was trying to get clean too. And for a little while, it was a good relationship, but then like we both relapsed at the same time. And when we relapsed, we went out even harder than we had gone before. And this time I went even deeper than like I had ever imagined going. And that's when I got into the whole world of manufacturing methamphetamines. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Breaking Bad, but wow. So it's actually pretty accurate, except for that whole like Walter White, like, you know, professor becoming kingpin kind of thing. Like, I think that's a little bit far-fetched, but as far as the like subculture of the meth world that it sort of captures, like Jesse Pinkman and all those guys, like it's pretty much accurate. And that was my life, you know, for a solid, I don't know, I guess 3 years. That was my life, was just like living that meth life world, and dealing drugs, manufacturing methamphetamine. I saw some of the darkest things that I've ever seen in my entire life during that season of my life. And things were really, really bad. I was on like a $300 a day habit. I was just constantly, you know, smoking meth. I couldn't get up out of bed without meth. Before I would eat, like I had to have it in my body just to get me going. I weighed 145 pounds. Wow. You know, I was cracked out. Like I weigh about 200 pounds now. So I was about 60 pounds lighter than I am right now. So I was like, dude, I was cracked out. My life was a mess. Things were just going so sideways for me. And I remember one day I had collected a bunch of materials to like produce some more meth and was getting ready to do that. And a buddy of mine had called and he had a connection with like some biker gangs to get crystal meth. And so he called me and he was like, hey, come over here. I want you to get some of this stuff so you can sell it. So I went over there and while I was there, I got a call from my landlord and he said, Scott, you either need to get here right now or you need to get as far away as you can because the SWAT team is going into your house and I don't know what you have in there, but it is not looking good.
Wow.
So the SWAT team raided my place. And I remember in that moment, like I spent my whole life staying as far away from a church as I possibly could. I was not the person that in high school they said, yeah, Scott Hatch, most likely to be a pastor. That was not me. Like I was always in trouble. I was getting into stuff, you know, like, you know, I was not the kid voted most likely to be a pastor. I stayed as far away from church as I possibly could. And so I didn't believe in God. I had a lot of questions about God. I had a lot of doubts about God. Mostly the reason I couldn't believe in God was because I couldn't understand how a good God, a God who was all good and all loving, could allow some of the bad things to happen that I had experienced in my life. And so that was a huge sticking point to me. But I remember in that moment on the phone with my landlord, I remember when he told me what was going on, I heard a voice and I can't really explain it. It wasn't like an audible voice. It was just like, it was like a voice inside, like in my soul. And I felt this voice just tell me it's over. It's over. Because up until this point, I kind of like, I had thought that my life was kind of like a music video, like a rap music video. Like, right. You know, it was like drugs. It was like, you know, it was it was girls, it was drugs, it was money. Like that was my lifestyle. And I remember God speaking to me, just saying like, it's over. Now, I didn't believe in God. I didn't know what that voice was. I didn't understand it, but I knew in my heart that like this life was over. So, because I wasn't at the house, you know, I was able to kind of just lay low for a little while. I thought maybe I'd get away with it. The girl that I was seeing at the time, she was there when the SWAT team raided. And you know, obviously she gave them my name. And a few weeks later, my name was in the newspaper, warrants, sealed indictment, you know, 3 counts of manufacturing of methamphetamine. And so I decided to turn myself in. I went and turned myself in. They booked me. I posted bond immediately. And because I have a really supportive mom who was always willing to stand beside me as long as I was willing to do the right thing, she helped me get out of jail and get into rehab again. So I went back to rehab and tried to stay clean again. Was clean for about 60 days. And in 2003, on Christmas Eve, I decided to relapse again. And I stayed out for about 3 days on meth. And when I came down, this time when I came down, I was so depressed. And I remember having this feeling of, I don't want to do meth anymore, but I don't want to stay clean either.
Mm.
And if I'm being honest, that was like a time where I was considering like ending my life.
Oh.
And again, I felt a small, still voice speak to me, telling me that I needed to pack everything that I had into a bag and move to Houston, Texas, and check myself into a year-long treatment program. And that's exactly what I did.
You're 20 years old?
I was 20, like 20 years old. This was 2003. And so December 27th, 2003 was the last time I ever put drugs or alcohol in my system. And that was the beginning of what has been an incredible journey and adventure of finding God and following Jesus. And so packed everything that I had, moved to Houston, Texas, checked myself into a year-long treatment program. This place was like boot camp for addicts. It was like, you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're making your bed. They've got to have like perfect creases. And like, if anything's out of line, like you're in trouble, you get thrown out of the place, which was nothing like the other rehabs I'd been to. Like the other rehabs I've been to, like they were like, I mean, it was like a resort, right? I mean, like they took care of you. They asked you had a personal chef, you know, it's just like everybody's asking about your feelings and stuff. This place wasn't like that at all. It was like, we are going to kick your butt to sobriety. And that's what it was. And strung together 10 months of sobriety. And I was at an AA meeting one night. And again, I was just feeling like my life was kind of like going nowhere. And before going to that meeting, I prayed. I said, God, like, if you're real, if you're out there, like, I need a sign because I'm not happy. Did you just, you know, save me from drugs and alcohol just to, you know, be in a rehab and like deliver pizzas the rest of my life? Like, what is my purpose? And there was a guy in the meeting. And after this AA meeting, a guy comes up to me and he says, man, I don't understand it. But he said, I feel like I'm supposed to give you a job. And I was like, really? I remember I'm like 20 years old. I'm a felon. Like, you know, the charges, I hadn't gone to court yet, but like I'm a felon. This guy doesn't know me from Adam. And here he is offering me a job. And I'm like, okay, you know, to me, that was an answer to prayer. So I took the job, and it wasn't long into the job that I realized he didn't hire me because of like my talent or my skills or like my good looks or any of that. Like he hired me because he wanted to tell me about Christ. And that's exactly what he did. He started sharing the gospel with me. I had never heard the gospel in my entire life. I thought Christianity was about like just being a good person. I thought, in fact, for a long time, I thought that was my problem, was that I was a bad person who needed to be made good. But what I came to realize was that really I was a dead person who needed to be brought to life. And that's what God did for me. And I remember one day just like talking to this friend of mine and being like, dude, like, again, I feel like my life is lacking in meaning and purpose. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. He said, you know, there's only one person on the planet that can give you the purpose and the meaning that you're searching for. And, you're not going to find that purpose and meaning in a bottle. You're not going to find it in a pill. You're not going to find it in a girl. You're not going to find it in anything else other than in God, in Jesus. And I was like, well, that sounds great, but I could never be good enough, to be a Christian. And he said, it's not about being good enough. It's about receiving a free gift that Jesus paid the ultimate price so that you could have a relationship with God. It's about just receiving that gift. That's all you got to do. I was like, really? I can do that. I mean, I can accept a free gift. And so that day I prayed to receive Christ into my heart. And that began a journey for me that it's been an adventure. And my life hasn't really been the same since.
When did you realize that you wanted to make this like the centerpiece of your life?
Yeah. So soon after that day where I prayed that prayer and I surrendered my life over to Jesus, I started going to church, and I was dating a girl at the time, and she's my wife now. But she wasn't a Christian.
Shout out, Sarah.
Yeah, shout out to Sarah. And so she wasn't a Christian at that time either. We came from very different backgrounds. She came from like a more wealthy sort of East Coast family, stable family, solid, all that. But she was kind of recovering from her own struggle with alcoholism. And we had met at the same time. We started dating, and I was so in love with her. I knew that I wanted to be with her the rest of my life, but I knew that there was a lot that I needed to do to work on myself before I was going to be ready for that. And so when my buddy invited me to church, I was like, well, can I invite this girl? And he was like, absolutely, invite this girl. And so I invited her to church, and we both got involved together in this class called Alpha, which was like an introduction to the Christian faith. And, it was through there that both of us, our faith was really solidified. But soon after our experience at Alpha, I mean, I was at this kind of like backyard revival event where they invited this evangelist to come and speak. And this guy mostly speaked at like prisons and to biker rallies and like kind of these like, all these different events. But he came out there and he spoke. And, I have a big belief that God still continues to speak in our world today. That God didn't just create the world and then just leave us to try to figure it out all on our own. Like he still works in the world today. And I remember being at that event, and this guy just kind of came up to me out of everyone in the crowd, and he said, I see God's hand on your life. He said, I believe that there's a calling on your life. And he said, I see you as a pastor and as a shepherd. And to try to understand like what that meant to me at that time in my life, it's kind of hard to grasp because now I've been a pastor for 16 years and it's like, it's who I am. But back then I was just a drug addict from Lubbock, Texas. You know what I mean? And for someone to speak that over me, that I would be a pastor, was like so like counter to anything that I had ever imagined. And so I took that word and I prayed about it. And then it was like other people around me were saying the same thing. And then I was like feeling in my prayer times that God was calling me to be a pastor. And I think the thing that really solidified it for me was when I returned to Lubbock to face the courts for my charges. And it was about 18 months after I had moved to Houston. I had to go back and face the courts. And when I got to the courthouse, I was so nervous. I was so afraid. But, our Christian friends, our small group had been praying. I had all these like letters, character witness letters and all that stuff. And I brought it to the courthouse, and I was so nervous as I walked in because I didn't know if they were going to put me in jail or what was going to happen. And I walked in, and my lawyer said, I need you to come over here to the side. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, man, but they threw out all your charges.
Wow.
Really?
All your charges, all 3 Class B felonies. I was like, what? I was like, I don't have to do any like probation, nothing. He was like, nope, nothing. He's like, here's what I recommend. Go back to Houston and keep doing what you've been doing because, obviously the judge has seen a difference in your life, the change that's happened in your life. And to me on that day, I felt like that was God telling me that I needed to give back all the things that I had done wrong, and I deserved to be a felon. But for him to wipe the slate clean for me, I saw that as a sign that like I needed to dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people find life in God and find life in Christ. And I wanted to do whatever it took to help other people who were on this journey of searching, in their faith. And um, so yeah, I mean, I remember going to the church and being like, I want to be a pastor. What do I have to do? And my pastor was he was so cool because he said, "Oh, you want to be a pastor, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to be a pastor. I'm ready. What do I got to do?" He said, "Well, if you want to be a pastor, here's what you need to do. You need to be the biggest servant in this whole place." He's like, I want you to start on the coffee team. We need somebody to help set up chairs. And so he said, whatever needs to be done, I want you to do it. And so that's what I did, man. And we went all in, and Sarah and I, we got involved in the church, and we served wherever we needed to. We were there, like we'd go to all 3 services. Our church had 3 services. We went to all 3 services, and then we went to like multiple small groups during the week. And we were just soaking in all we could. I went to HBU, which is now HCU, Houston Christian University, and I majored in Christianity and business. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it was a double major. Majored in Christianity, and once I finished up my degree there, the church that I was at brought me on full-time as an associate pastor, and I started working on a master's degree at that time, and felt strongly early on that God was calling me to plant a church. And I kind of settled into being an associate pastor because it was kind of nice. I mean, we had this like big church. We had all these wonderful people that just loved us and supported us. And I kind of was like, man, this is good. I like this, this is great. But God was like, no, I've got more for you. And that's kind of another story, but it eventually brought us here to Austin, Texas. And, we moved here with $20,000 in a dream. And, we sank that whole $20,000 into our startup, trailer to do portable church. And, the rest is history, really.
Let's take a minute to talk about some of the sponsors and brands who support the show.
What are you thinking?
I was thinking about Carnivore Bar. What are your thoughts on Carnivore Bar?
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable product. We were lucky enough to have the founder, Philip Meese, on the show a few months ago, and he was able to send us a bunch of product when we started the relationship and absolutely loved it. I mean, it's minimum ingredient product, beef, tallow, salt, and then they do have a honey flavored option as well, but it's so nice to have a bar that's like 3 to 4 ingredients. And like when you're following a carnivore diet, it's really tough to find products that are in line with that specific diet,
Yeah, for me, it kind of hits like the holy trinity of what you're looking for when you're looking for food. So it's nutrient dense, it's convenient, and it tastes great. And as you said, most people who are trying to eat healthy, the convenience factor is kind of a tough part. So just being able to have something you can grab on the go, know that you're going to have that nutrition for the day, it's huge.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough, we got to actually see their factory too in Missouri, and they're just doing things the right way. I love how they offer an option for like carnivore purists where it's just beef, tallow, salt. And then they also have an animal-based option too. If you do want a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of variety, they have the honey in that option. And they're just people that are doing things the right way. They're very mission focused. They're carnivores themselves. And, we're always on the go. We're traveling. We've taken a bunch of flights together. To have a bar that has 30 grams of fat too, like that's huge from an energy density standpoint, right?
Yeah, he checks all the boxes, or the company checks all the boxes. And I just think the fact that they're sourcing from a regenerative farm as well, and Joyce Farms, just a win-win.
100%. The Carnivore Bar. So we got the affiliate link, and then it's code MAFIA for 10% off.
And then another one of our sponsors, one of our favorite farms, Holy Cow. We're friends with Ann and Warren, and what they're doing at Holy Cow is pretty remarkable. The relationships that they've built in the industry and how long they've been doing the grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative model is really innovative. They were one of the first people to be doing that and supplying whole foods early on. Just a great community farm, and also just product is something that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think number one, to your point, Harry, they're just incredible people. We got to hear them speak at the Beef Initiative conference in Colorado. We had never met them before, but just hearing Warren's story where they were following a standard American diet, he had had a heart attack and they were just looking for answers of like, how can we actually get healthier? Do I need to be dependent on medication? And they started changing their diets to incorporating more animal foods. And he completely reversed those symptoms of his stroke. And now they're just doing things the right way. They're grass finishing their beef. They're incorporating incredible practices. They have great relationships with the animals. And they're very passionate about just like connecting directly with the customer and also educating their customer on grass finished beef.
Yeah, and I think the best part is too, they're shipping nationally and trying to reach a bigger audience. So being able to not only supply beef nationally, but also educate people on the quality of good, clean, whole foods is just, it's an incredible mission.
How much do you love their beef bacon, by the way? I know that's your go-to.
Dude, it's one of the best things I've ever tasted.
It's that good.
No, honest to God, it's so good.
Holy cow.
Yeah. One of the other farms that supports us is Perennial Pastures, another regenerative farm out of San Diego. Our experience with Kevin Munoz, the owner, we had him on the show, a young first-generation rancher who's really empowered by this movement of regenerative agriculture and really wants to be a leader in the space. I think our conversation with him was so insightful just in terms of how mission-focused he is and how he really thinks about his farm as a business and wanting it to be here 50, 100 years down the road, even though he's just the first generation of it. And I think just being able to spend time with him out in San Diego was kind of the perfect indication of that, where we got to go have a meal with him at his house, hang out with his wife and kids. Like, what an amazing person. And I think his mission focus around raising really high quality beef and restoring nutrients to the soil is just one of those rare missions that I think everyone can get around.
Yeah, he has such a commitment to really feeding the local community in San Diego, in the San Diego County first and foremost, but he's also passionate about feeding the community around the country. So I know they've invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources to being able to order beef in bulk on their website. So I know that they now offer quarter, half, whole cows directly off the website. They have that great ancestral blend ground beef product. So it actually has organ grinds mixed into the ground beef. So you're getting the benefits of like an ounce or so of organ meat, but because it's in the ground beef, you really can't taste it at all. And I think to your point, Harry, just another amazing person. You know, Kev was someone that he was following a paleo diet in college and started realizing, wow, when I nourish my body with real foods, I feel amazing. Had a really successful stint in tech, but realized that there was just something else that he was passionate about. So he's one of those rare cases where, you know, he put his money where his mouth is, and he's a first generation farmer, just, you know, bootstrapping this thing, raising money, and just so passionate about feeding the community. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on organ supplements, and what do you think about the company that supports our podcast, Optimal Carnivore?
Such a good question, man. I think organ meat is something that's gained a ton of notoriety the last few years, and for good reason. I don't want to speak for you, but I think both of us have had a ton of benefits just incorporating organ meats into our diet. I would say that, you know, we definitely prefer the raw source of organs, where we'll just, you know, chop up some liver and some heart, and, you know, there are different ways to prepare it. I think the raw source is the most nutrient dense, but you know, we're fortunate that there are companies like Optimal Carnivore that exist that freeze dry organ capsules, so you can actually take them on the go. You know, there are a ton of times where we're traveling where we're not going to have access to raw organs. So I can throw a little Ziploc bag together of Optimal Carnivore and be good to go. And I think 6 pills is an ounce of organs, which is like the daily recommended amount that will give you a lot of those really good quality vitamins in there. So that's kind of how I think we've been using it. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think the fact that it just makes organs accessible to people. And I think that organs are generally just a food group that are underutilized when it comes to eating nose to tail. And the nature's vitamin is a perfect name for these organ foods. And I think a lot of people are pretty, you know, in the mainstream object to eating organ meats, but when you put it in a pill form that doesn't taste bad, it's convenient, you can put it in your backpack, it makes things a lot easier. And I also think that just generally these brands Optimal Carnivore is focused on making people healthier, which is just such a strong mission. And, you know, I think liver capsules is a great way to get people thinking about their health differently.
100%. There's probably someone that's listening to this right now, and you're interested in organ meats, but the taste might make you a bit squeamish. You feel strange about eating raw foods. Maybe you cook liver and you don't like it. Maybe it has a metallic taste. I think that's also where the organ capsules play such a great role, is that you're still getting that nutrient density, but you're getting it in a very convenient capsule-like format, and it just takes away any of that squeamishness that you might have to the taste. It's, it's just a great product. And also Richard, who runs Optimal Carnivore, he's started listening to the show really early on, and he's built his own organ supply chain and is just doing things the right way and really trying to support the right people in the space. So just proud to be associated with them, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening. Now we're going to go back to the show.
It's such a powerful story. Powerful is probably not the right word to use because it's more than that. But I'm just curious, have you ever read the book called Fearless? It's about Adam Brown. I don't know if you ever heard of him before. He's like a SEAL Team 6 operator. He was killed, I think, a few years ago. But there's kind of like some weird parallels between not weird, cool parallels between your story and his. And he was a meth addict as well, basically going nowhere in Arkansas, and then found his return to faith, which really pushed him forward. He ended up becoming a SEAL, but also he had gotten connected with his wife, like right when he was on his process to recovery. And he had like relapsed a few times when he was with her. But I think that it was like her influence that really helped push him to becoming a better version of himself. So I was just curious, when you were talking about Sarah, like, what do you think she saw in you when you were like 20 years old and kind of just going through it and still kind of like a felon at the time?
And that's a great question. I would love to have her here because I honestly don't know, because there wasn't a lot positive about me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And a lot of guys, talk about how I married up. And, it's absolutely the case. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she's made me better in every single way. I think at first, at first, probably our attraction to one another was mostly physical. But I think, I can't speak for her, but I do think that early on, especially once I started to really pursue my faith, I think what became most attractive about me to her was probably my passion for God, because it didn't matter. It didn't matter what happened. Like, I was going to follow Jesus. It didn't matter what the circumstances were. It didn't matter like what the consequences were. Like, I was all in to follow Jesus. And I think that there was probably something about that was really attractive to her. And we really, helped each other grow in our faith together. And we found faith together, and we found sobriety together. And, it's been an incredible journey. But I'd really be interested to hear her answer that question, because like at that time in my life, it's hard to see what there really was that I had to offer as like, a 20-year-old recovering addict with no education or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. I was just curious because it does seem like there's the divorce rates have never been higher, and it's just so easy. There's so much optionality. Hey, I'm not happy here. I just get out of this. I move on to the next person, next partner.
Yeah.
Where it does seem like the strongest relationships are the one that are really rooted in faith and that willingness to like just commit and go all in together.
And that's the beautiful thing, is like everything that we have, we've built together. You know what I mean? And like Sarah, it's funny because like the first part of our marriage was all about like the ministry and investing in the ministry. And it still is. We are all about the church. Like our whole family, I'm not the pastor. Like we're all involved. Like my kids are part of the church planning team. Like they show up and they help and they set up. Like it's a family thing. But our focus has always been like kind of my career and ministry and everything. But it's interesting the way God has elevated her, because in the last 5 years, like her career has taken off and she's gone like way beyond anything that like we ever imagined, you know what I mean? And it's not like, I guess it's not a surprise. It's just funny because we never emphasized that, but like God has promoted her in powerful ways. And now she's like an executive level person in healthcare, and she's just doing an incredible job in her work. And it's just, it's amazing. And to me, it's just a testament of how when you put God first, like he takes care of everything else. You know what I mean? Because we're doing far better than we ever would have imagined.
Yeah. And you two have a special relationship, obviously, and your kids are amazing, but it does go to show that like you guys working together and just being so bought in, exactly what Brett's saying, like how far you can go and what you can build when you do have that person who's complimenting you and willing to just be by your side through thick and thin.
That's right. And that's so important. You know what I mean? And, you know, we support one another. We support each other, and whatever it is that we feel like God is putting on our hearts, we're fully supportive of that. And, again, like the church, you know, it's never been like Scott's thing. It's always been like our family's thing. It's what we all do together. And in the same way with what she's doing in her professional life, like we're all supportive of what she's doing there, and cheering her on. And you know, it's a family endeavor, you know. And I find that, like, you know, over the years I've counseled a lot of marriages, you know, and I've seen people go through difficult times. I've seen all kinds of things, you know, in relationships and in marriages. And one of the things that I've noticed is that couples that seem to really stand the test of time are couples that are united when it comes to the family's mission and the family's vision. And, you know, it's when you have two people come together with competing visions that's where there's issues, right? And it's like division literally means like double vision. It's two visions. You can't have a family that's divided. You know, you need to be unified under one vision, one mission. And I feel like that's something that we have done well over the years. I mean, obviously there's tons of areas where you know, we work on and we try to improve, but I do think that is one thing that since the beginning we've always done together.
Yeah. You mentioned your family makes a really strong effort to put God first, which is interesting because I feel like so many people view him as a last resort where it's like, hey, I'm going in for a felony charge. Let me go pray. Or I feel this voice, or like there's so many things that I could count to where I like wasn't faithful at all. But then when shit hit the fan and I needed him, then I prayed. And I'm just curious, why do you think that? I don't know if it's a societal thing, or why are we so wired to just view him when we need something as opposed to like being proactive and putting him first in our life?
I mean, that's a great question, man. I think it's like they say, you know, there's no atheists in the foxholes, right? And it's like when the crap hits the fan, like everybody's a believer, right? And it's interesting because, like, you know, when people are polled, so many people believe in the power of prayer. It's something like 80% of people believe in the power of prayer, but such a small percentage of people believe in God. I'm like, how do you believe in prayer, but you don't believe in God? You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't, you know, I think it's the culture's value of self-sufficiency. And really, when you think about the world that we live in today, it's all about kind of, you know, self-sufficiency. It's about that independent sort of spirit of like creating this like empire for ourselves that, you know, is completely invulnerable from attack. And, you know, we're self-made people. And I think there's actually some good values in that because it cultivates hard work and a good work ethic. And I think those things are great, and grit and determination and perseverance. But like, you know, there sometimes we lack vulnerability, I think, when that becomes our entire ethos. You know what I mean? And there has to be a place where we say, you know what, like, I need help. I need God's help. Like, as tough as I might be, as strong as I might be, as capable and smart as I might be, like, I need God's help. And there are areas where I am weak. And in our world today, like especially among men, to admit weakness is like vulnerability, right? And vulnerability, we're often taught, is a bad thing. We don't want to reveal where we're vulnerable. But like for us as Christians, like we serve this Savior Jesus who, like, you know, at the end of his ministry career, he was dead on a cross. By the way, he did get resurrected, right? Like he did, but like ultimately he gave it all. He was willingly betrayed by the people closest to him, right? And he calls us to kind of like follow him in this path of self-sacrifice. And I think honestly that the path of self-sacrifice is just an uncomfortable path. And I think a lot of people don't want to walk down that path. And I don't know, yeah, I think that is kind of part of the reason why.
Yeah.
How do you articulate God to someone who's just coming to you maybe for the first time or just interested in revisiting their faith? You know, how do you go about unpacking that to someone who's, you know, open to it, but maybe like needs to hear it from, you know, a pastor or someone who's more involved with the church?
It's a really great question. You know, for me, the way I would answer that question has a lot to do with what is that person's background? What is their spiritual background? What is their context for understanding God? And so, for somebody that has questions about God, I would kind of just want to get what is their background? You know what I mean? Do they have any experience with church? What is their context for spirituality? Like what, I would want to get a little bit more understanding of that. But generally speaking, when I talk to people who have either had some experience in the church and some experience with God and maybe walked away and now they're interested in coming back, a lot of times there's a lot of like misunderstandings and misconceptions about who God is and what it means to be a Christian. And a lot of times what I try to do is I try to unpack that a little bit with people, because oftentimes the God that many people are rejecting, I would reject too. Right. Because their concept of God, it's a misconception of who God really is. And what I try to do is find that common ground to say like, yeah, it's possible that the God you're rejecting, I would reject as well. And let me try to paint a picture of you, an accurate picture of who God is, particularly who God is revealed in Christ, And so yeah, that's usually kind of the approach that I would take. And, usually people have questions and they have doubts. And I mean, I think it's okay to have questions and to have doubts. And it's through the process of struggling through those questions and struggling through those doubts that I think that ultimately we emerge with a faith that can be trusted. I always tell people like, don't trust a faith that hasn't been tested. You know what I mean?
Right.
A faith that's been tested is a faith that can be trusted, right? And so I don't want to live my life, and I don't want to let the foundation of my life be built on something that hasn't been tested. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So like, I say like, dig into the doubts, ask the questions, like go to those places. God's not afraid of our doubts. And, so for somebody that's just kind of like coming back to God, like I would offer an invitation to sort of engage in that process of whatever their doubts are and whatever their questions are, to be kind of a conversation partner with them through that. Because a lot of times in churches, like when people hear questions that lead to doubt and stuff like that, people get defensive.
Right.
And they want to try to defend God or something. And it's like, God doesn't need our defense. You know what I mean? Like he's God, he's holy. And, I think more than anything, what people need, they need a conversation partner. They need somebody to walk with them through those seasons and to continually point them towards the cross, towards Jesus. And to show them also that, you practice what you preach. You're not just this guy that's like, saying, here's how you need to live, but that you're actually living it out.
Right.
And I think, just to mention, Natasha's a person who does this really, really well. She's a person that just like lives out her faith. She's kind. She shows compassion to people. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And people are like, there's something different about you.
Yes.
Like, tell me what is different about you. Like, there's so many triathletes and coaches out there, but there's a different vibe around this. And there's a different atmosphere here that I can feel it in the culture. Tell me about it. And, I mean, to me, those are the kinds of Christians that will change the world. It's not the really loud ones that want to fight the culture wars and all that. Like, I mean, like, I think that we should have a voice as Christians. Don't get me wrong. But like, at the end of the day, it's about just Christians being like Christ and loving people and, putting God first in their lives.
So good. What is the feeling like being a pastor where a lot of people are really looking up to you and probably putting you on a pedestal in some ways, when you're probably like, well, I'm also just a man and I'm flawed just like everyone else? That's probably like a really interesting position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting position to be in. And I know for me personally, like I try to be 100% at all times, like about my own struggles, my own flaws, my own failings. I don't ever try to paint myself as this, a picture as this person who's got it all together, who always gets it right, who always is perfectly Christ-like in every situation that I'm in, or who's even like most of the time Christ-like in every situation that I'm in. Like I do, I'm a human and I struggle like anybody else. And so I try to be just like vulnerable with my own struggles, and I try to be open about who I am and the things that I've been through, and vulnerable,
Yeah.
And to me, I think that helps because, yeah, I mean, even though I think sometimes people will still put you on that pedestal, I think that transparency is so important. I heard a leader say it this way one time. It's like, people are impressed by your strengths, but they connect with you through your weaknesses and your vulnerability. And so to be vulnerable and to share where you're weak in the areas where you're trying to grow and improve. And I don't know, I think that helps people just see that you're a normal person. It's like, yeah, you have struggles too.
Totally. You mentioned guys in particular seem to struggle with that. And we talk about this a lot, just like what a lot of young men seem to be going through right now in terms of just like lacking that purpose, lacking that ability to be vulnerable and like actually find some sort of mission to drive themselves towards. And I don't want to like speak in generalizations, but it does feel like there's a whole kind of generation of men who are kind of lacking in that like purpose driven lifestyle. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and like sort of what you observe from your position as a pastor, what young men are going through today.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot going on in our culture today when it comes to the whole subject of gender, man. And honestly, a lot of it is very counter to what the Bible teaches about what it means to be a man. And I think there's a lot of confusion in our world today about what it means to be masculine, what it means to be a man. But I do believe that the Bible is pretty clear, that as men, like, we are to have purpose. We're to be men of faith. We're to be leaders. We're called to lead our families. We're called to be God-centered people. And I think that the Bible does really provide a clear path for any guy who's kind of looking and searching for purpose and meaning in the midst of a culture that it just seems like, our masculinity is kind of being like stripped away from us, and it's almost seen as a positive virtue to be less masculine. You know what I mean? And it's like, the Bible is like pretty clear that there are roles for men and women. And like, I think that there's I think there's a lot there for any guy that's kind of just searching what does it mean to be a man, and how do I be a better man? How do I be a faithful man? I think that there's a lot there. So
yeah, it sounds like you found your purpose in your early 20s and you just haven't looked back. And it's such a shame because I think you can come across men when they don't have their purpose and they're lost and they're looking for that thing. And it's just like it's such an amazing. I think we wrote a post a couple weeks ago and I titled it like the depression to anxiety and depression, and it was basically about this concept of like leaning in and finding in what you're called to do and just go all in on that thing and just trust that like the money will work out. But
yes,
it's like someone that has a purpose, they're like literally on fire. You can feel it. Like when you're preaching on Sundays, like we say it all the time, like you literally feel like you're on fire for God, which is so cool.
We kind of have like this aversion to risk, and risk is when your faith is tested, right? Like when you actually have to go out and be like, I don't know what the outcome is going to be here, but like, I know I'll get through it. And I think those are the moments when you do kind of discover like who you are, what you're built of, and what you can do in the world. And I think those moments now are harder to come by because we're just afraid to take the shot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we live in a world today that is just so safety focused, right? It's like everybody is trying to do everything that they can to avoid any sort of risk. But what we forget is like the forefathers of our faith and our country and our forefathers, they took risks. And the reason why we talk about them today is because they took risks. They did things even when it wasn't safe and it didn't seem like the smart play. Like they did it because they felt that, God was calling them into it. And I mean, I think when we read the Bible, we see story after story of people who just stepped out in faith because they felt God was leading them to do something. And the result was God showed up in big ways and he did the impossible. And it's like, faith is spelled R-I-S-K, and it's like, if you want to see God move in big ways, you have to take risks eventually.
Yeah.
And it's hard though, because it's tough. Like when we moved here to Austin, neither of us had jobs. We really were betting on the church like growing and being able to support our family quickly, you know. And the Lord ended up providing like really good work for Sarah, and I was bivocational working at Lifetime for a long time. And God, He worked it all out. It wasn't the way we thought it was going to work. We thought the church was going to be like 500 people, and I was going to be on like full-time pastor, and Sarah was going to be a stay-at-home mom. That's what we thought, because that's what we had in Sugar Land before. But God had other plans, and you know, it's been an incredible journey. And I'm all in. And that's my encouragement to people, is just like figure out what it is. You know, a lot of people talk about find your why. And I think that there's something to that, about just like find what it is that drives you. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and ask God, you know, and press into God and find that what is it that God is calling me into? And it doesn't have to be like this thing, like this is what it's going to be forever. But what is God calling me into right now? And then just go all in and do it. You know, and see as God moves, because, you know, whatever He calls us to do, He will give us all the resources we need to do it. And it may not look the way we thought it would look, but you know, His purpose always prevails.
Scott, you've talked about the power of prayer a few times, and I'm just curious, for someone that's listening to this, that's maybe thinking about finding their faith or going on their journey, like how do you think about maybe like structuring in prayer into your day, or like are you like regimented with that? Does it just come in waves and then you pray? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, my prayer life has evolved a lot over the last like 18 years. You know what I mean? Like it has evolved so much. In the beginning, before I was even a believer, it was just like me hitting my knees and being like, God, if you're there, please reveal yourself to me. For real. Like I hit my knees and prayed that prayer every single day religiously. God, if you're there, reveal yourself to me. And that was what led to that kind of supernatural turn of events that I described earlier. But that was my prayer life early on, you know? And today I would say, like, you know, I'm a big proponent of putting God first in everything, including my day. And so like first part of the day, I try to get my mindset in the right place. And whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or however much time, like I try to put God first at the top of my day, before I check email, before I scroll Instagram, before I get into, you know, whatever it is that I'm going to get into that day.
Listen to the Meat
Mafia. Before I work out, before I listen to Meat Mafia, you know, like, you know, I get into God's word, and I spend a little time in prayer. But it goes beyond that. You know, and I feel like my prayer life today, it's a conversational thing that happens throughout the day. And you know, it's grown to this place where I feel like I have a pretty, for the most part, solid connection with Jesus. And it's like when if I start feeling anxious, or if I start feeling angry, or if I start feeling like, those are the moments. To me, those are like the check engine light. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, check engine lights on. It's time for me to go to God and see what's going on. And I take those things to the Lord, and you know, he works with me on that stuff. And so that's kind of what my prayer life looks like today. It's kind of a daily conversation thing that ebbs and flows all throughout the day, but it always begins with that time early in the morning when I wake up, just putting God first, because I have a belief that when we put God first, He blesses the rest. And that's in every area of life, in our day, in our week, in our family, in our finances. When we put God first, He blesses the rest.
One of the things I've kind of observed on my journey is that faith really has this way of just reprioritizing things. And I love that you can break it down to a day and, you know, still think about just prioritizing, you know, the things that are most important first, and then everything kind of comes after that. And I know, like, for me, like, that's a struggle for a lot of people, like putting those things first. Is there anything that you tell people when it comes to just like building that habit, or just wanting to incorporate it a little bit more in their life, like how they can start doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first you have to it's all about priorities, right? I mean, and like everybody, regardless of whether or not you've like put a whole lot of thought into this, like we all have priorities in life. And one of the ways that you can tell what your priorities are is how you spend your time and how you spend your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are different ways to tell like what our priorities are. And I would just say like, for each individual to prayerfully ask like, God, what would it look like for me to put you first in every area of my life? And just see if he doesn't give you direction. Like, what would it look like for me to put you first in my day? Um, and just kind of break it down, to put you first in my business, to put you first in my career, to put you first in my marriage, to put you first in this relationship that I'm in. What does it look like for me to put you first? And I mean, and that's where knowing the scripture is pretty important too, because like God's not going to tell you to do anything that would violate what's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So like we need to know what the Bible teaches about God before we can really understand what it means to put him first.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
it's kind of
so,
a tricky part for some people, because
yeah,
people who are coming back into it like might not have the best understanding of how they should be thinking about these things.
right. And that's why I think like small groups are so important, and being involved in a church and a community, and even having like spiritual mentors who you can like reach out to and say like, I'm struggling in this area of my life. Like, how do I manage this? How do I put God first in this area of my life? Or I want to put God first in this area of my life, but it's hard, because I think we can all agree, like it's hard to put God first in life.
Definitely.
I mean, we've hit on a lot of that. Like it's hard.
Totally.
It's hard to put God first in dating, right? Like it's hard. It is hard to put God first. It's hard to put God first in all areas of our lives, right? And we need help with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a community is really, really important. It's just like training, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you got runs to do, you got things that are really, really hard to do, you got goals that you want to accomplish, and you need a community to help support you in that journey of getting to that place, and achieving those goals.
Mm-hmm. Natasha was probably the first person that opened me up to that concept of putting God first in your business, because I think for whatever reason, I don't have a good reason for this, but I thought that like wanting to be really successful in business and then your faith were like conflicting things, as opposed to like being able to actually combine those things in one path. And I think she had said with NVDM, that was like one of the first examples where she was like, I'm going to start this new business. There's faith, but I'm going to just lead with God being first. And now it's like she's built the most successful triathlon club in the country. And like you said, there's this special feel to it. Athletes feel like pulled in there, and she's just building something unbelievable, all from like putting him first and just achieving unbelievable success from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that there is, because, the whole Christian story and the whole Christian message is about there. Ultimately, it is about sacrifice, and it's about like this God we serve that made himself vulnerable, and, like all this stuff. We tend to think that like success and faith are like mutually exclusive. Like they can't exist in the same realm. But I truly believe that when we put God first, he blesses the rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Like when he's first, he blesses the other things that we do in our lives. And I think Natasha's a perfect example of that. Like she puts
really
God
is.
first, and God blesses the rest of what she does.
Mm.
And I've seen that in my own family, and yeah, I think it's a principle that's all throughout the Bible. And it's true, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge
Absolutely.
because we're constantly being tempted to put God in other places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of things that are important to us in our lives. When we think about the priorities of our lives, what's in our top 10? And ultimately, where does Jesus want to be in our top 10?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the answer is he wants to be first.
Yeah.
Like I say this a lot, he didn't die on a cross to make our top 10. You know what I'm saying? Like he wants to be number one. He wants to be Lord. And the reason why is because he wants greater things for us than even we want for us. And like, I know we have big vision, we have big goals, we have big dreams, but his vision and his goals and his dreams are even bigger than ours. And when we put him first, like that opens the door to what he has in store for us, which is so much greater than what we can even ask for or imagine. And yeah, but it can be tough.
That's amazing. One of the things we talked about, and I just want to make sure we get this in because I think it relates well to what we talk about all the time, is just the physical body and how that plays a role in faith. And really just taking care of yourself and those important aspects that actually let you become more spiritual by taking care of your body. So I remember, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, maybe, that was kind of the center of your sermon.
Yes.
Maybe 4 weeks ago.
Yes.
But we talked about it before the show. I'd love to just touch on that before we put a bow on the conversation.
Yeah. So this is something I'm really passionate about. And in fact, like when we moved to Austin, it was a big reason why we came here, because we knew that there were a lot of like health conscious, like fit-minded type of people here. And, you know, I've always had a passion for exploring the intersection between physical and spiritual health. In fact, I did a TED talk on this subject. And, you know, I got banned by TED though. They didn't accept it because I wasn't scientific enough for them. But
so ridiculous.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good. But, you know, like it's one of those things that I have a lot of passion for. And it's been so cool because, you know, I've seen that intersection through my work at Lifetime Fitness and then, you know, with NVDM, but just like bringing those two worlds together of faith and spirituality has always been a passion of mine. But, you know, just speaking on that subject a little bit, the Bible teaches a lot about the importance of taking care of our bodies. And I think a lot of folks don't really understand that. Sadly, there's research that shows that oftentimes Christians are some of the most unhealthy people in the world. And a lot of people have asked the question, why is that? Why would Christians be some of the most unhealthy people in the world? And the reason why I think it is because, you know, in churches, there's a lot of talk about the soul. There's a lot of talk about the spirit. It's all about, let's get souls saved. It's all about salvation. But we forget that like our bodies are connected. Our soul, our body, our mind, it's all connected. And in fact, the Bible teaches us that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, that God lives inside of our bodies. And so for me, one of the biggest reasons that Christians should take care of their bodies is because God lives inside of us. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know about you guys, but like when people come over to my house, if they come over to my house and they leave things a mess, they like get stuff on the walls and they break things and stuff I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think God's happy when we do that either. When we put trash into our bodies, you know, when we don't exercise, when we don't take care and steward these bodies well that God has given us, I think that I just think that like we're missing a big piece of what it means to be people of faith and to be authentically human, because we're created in the image of God. His Spirit dwells inside of us, and so I mean, for no other reason than that, like that seems to me to be reason enough that we would want to be mindful and careful about how we take care of our bodies. And when we do that, we have more energy to do the things that God tells us to do. We have more energy for prayer. We have more energy to go to church. We have more energy to go serve the poor, the homeless. We have more energy to tell other people about faith. We're more confident. We feel better. We're a better witness, living witness of the abundant life that God offers us, right? And but I think in churches oftentimes, like there's just this focus on the soul, and we get this thinking that like, well, it doesn't matter how we treat our bodies because when we die, our bodies are going to be gone and we're just going to be in heaven. But the truth is that like we're actually going to receive resurrected bodies, and we're going to dwell in new creation in heaven for eternity in our new resurrected bodies. And so the question is just like, if we're going to be in this body for eternity, why not take care of it?
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Why not take care of it? Why not start now? You know, like instead of just waiting until we die. And I mean, there's honestly a lot to be said on it, but there's a lot of research and study that shows just like how religion can positively impact a person's like physical fitness, you know, because the same disciplines and practices that you apply to your Christian faith, like through prayer and all that stuff, apply in the physical world, you know, and vice versa. And sometimes like athletes can be some of the most like faithful, devout people because they understand discipline. They understand hard work. They understand perseverance through pain. And that's what faith is in a lot of instances. So
it's interesting with nutrition and fitness, how a lot of times we almost selfishly think that it only affects us if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't go for the run or eat the right foods. It's like, well, I'm going to get overweight or out of shape, but who cares because it's just me. And you even think about like the role that you're in as a pastor. It's like, if you're eating the right foods or you're going in that run, we were saying this when we got coffee the other day, you literally feel like a better version of yourself. And then you're going out there on Sundays and you're preaching to people and helping to teach them about God and guide them on their faith. So literally by you taking care of yourself, you're helping other people on their own journey. And you think about, I just think about that a lot as like it being an unselfish pursuit. Like if I ever want to eat something crappy or like maybe stay up too late or not take care of myself, I'm like, no, you're trying to put out a great show to actually help people get healthier. So you're not going to be at the best version of yourself. So you're like almost depriving the world or God of your gifts by not doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. I mean, that's it. And like a huge reason why I work out today more than just the physical part of it. I'm not like just trying to like, I'm not trying to like get super shredded or anything like that, even though
Sure.
at the end of the day, like it's all about the mental piece. You know what I mean? And like there's so much science and research that backs the value of exercise. And I do it for the endorphin rush, man. And like I'm just better. I'm a better version of me when I have exercised. And a lot of people tend to view exercise as like this like optional sort of like luxury thing that you do if you have time or if you have the ability, but that's not the way I see it, man. It's like, it's essential. It is part of the day. It's part of the routine. And it's not like something that's negotiable. Like it's gonna like it is built into every single day that like, I'm going to get an hour at least of like, rigorous exercise because it's going to help me. It's going to help me be a better dad. It's going to help me be a better pastor, a better husband, a better friend, a better everything, because it's just so good. It's so good for your mind and your body and your spirit. It's all connected, man.
Absolutely. We've covered so much ground, and I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this episode, both from like the faith perspective and then just everything you just talked about treating your body correctly. Hopefully we get to do a few more of these episodes too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just really appreciate you coming on and everything that you've done for us. It's been an amazing relationship, and we're just excited to continue to grow it and work together to just be better people. So appreciate it, Scott.
Absolutely, man. And I got to say, the blessing has been mine. Like, it's been so awesome to get to know you guys and to see y'all's grit, determination, and following your passion and your dream and everything. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.